So, question number one, in the event that a couple created a lot of embryos, fully biologically their children, and the woman is now truly physically unable to carry more babies, what should they do with the remaining frozen embryos? And then she gives a few examples. Can you do this, this, or this? Should they be adopted out, but stay with their birth parents, but with access to the biological family? Should they use a surrogate and return the child to the genetic family? Or should they discard the embryos? Is that the most ethical thing to do?
Pretty challenging. And I think that we're going to get to the specific answer to this question, but we are not going to be able to do this justice until we say, why do we have frozen children? Why are there living children that are in frozen storage scattered all across this country? And as Josh and I talked about in the last couple of segments, we don't know how many there are, but estimates range between 1 million and 10 million. Now, many of those children could be implanted by the commissioning parents, by the people that made them. And many of the times they are not for financial reasons, or maybe because the family feels like, well, they've got the 2 children that they want and the other 6, they're not really sure what to do with, so they continue paying the annual storage fee. But there are some scenarios where that may not be possible because the parents have died, because maybe they created the babies 30 years ago. And now those are genuine orphans with no living relatives still, even though they have not yet been born. I mean, what we're talking about is things that we've never really faced in the human species before. And so these kinds of questions are complex because we don't have examples of what to do when you look back over the last couple thousand years of human existence. So now you've got this scenario where I know these people too. Like I know the people who made frozen embryos, made children, froze them, love them. They're pro-life. They thought, I'm totally going to go back and implant all 3 of these, or all 5 of them, or all 7 of them. And then unforeseen circumstances get in the way. She has a hysterectomy, or they go through a divorce, or maybe she really gets to the point where, okay, I made these children when I was 43, and now I'm 53. And the doctor says, you cannot carry a pregnancy. Like, it will threaten your health. So the first thing we need to conclude is, no matter how solid you are, no matter how committed you are, no matter how pro-life you are, sometimes things are not going to go the way that you expected it to go, because so much of this is out of your control. And your relationships, your body, the timeline for what you're thinking about. Sometimes finances get in the way because this is a very expensive process, and the fertility clinics like it that way. They're not going to make this easy on you. They don't make money unless it's financially burdensome for you. And so anytime you are making a baby and storing them in a cryogenic freezer, those children are at risk. Very often they will not emerge from that frozen orphanage at all. So before we can answer the question of what do we do with the children who genuinely cannot be implanted into their biological mother, is to say, if we truly care about children, we're going to give you the most child-centric answer we can. But the truly child-centric conclusion is, do not freeze humans. And we have to work towards a future where even if you permit some IVF, freezing children is never permitted. Now, before we go on to that and kind of answer that, what do we do in this very narrow situation? Jen, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, there's just it's so laced with ethical questions from start to finish. Like, should we grade? People will say, well, if you have babies that have a chance of having cerebral palsy, you are inflicting some kind of harm on them you could avoid. But people act like grading embryos is saving lives. Some people might think we're cutting out the bad genes. It's like, no, you're just cutting out the embryos that are predicted to have issues. So then freezing them for an indiscriminate amount of time and implanting multiple at once because you're assuming some will not survive. It's laden with ethical issues from start to finish. And when we're talking about the industry, they're not going to move an inch on any of these accommodations that we're trying to say, hey, we could allow for some IVF, but you're not allowed to grade embryos. There's no way they're going to do that because, like you said, that would hurt their bottom line. And their success rates, if I don't implant 5 at a time and 2 take, then their success rates don't work as well. So trying to regulate the industry seems kind of impossible. And we just need people to start considering all of this before they get trapped into these impossible ethical situations.
Yeah. So let's say that you are in that impossible situation and you have those 3 children that are left. What do you do with them? Because you are 53 and the doctor has said you really could be at risk if you implant the children, or maybe you don't have a uterus anymore, or you've gone through a divorce. I mean, these are all things that I've talked to people about, read about in the last couple of weeks. So it's not uncommon. These are things that happen in life. And when you have children in frozen storage, you don't get to control all the variables. So what do you do? Well, the options are you thaw and discard. Okay, so the children lose their right to life, and you thaw and discard them. Number 2 is you donate them to research. So children lose their right to life after they've been experimented on for a couple weeks. The third one is you donate the children to another couple as if they're property. And then you, in essence, hand them over to the fertility clinic. So the fertility clinic decides what happens to them and who they go to. The fourth is you embryo adopt them out. And that is going to result in them retaining the connection with their birth mother, but losing the relationship with their genetic mother. And the fifth option is you contract a surrogate to gestate your children, and then they lose a relationship with their birth mother, but they get to be raised by their genetic parents. So, what do all these things have in common? The child pays the price. Every single one of these scenarios, the child loses something they have a natural right to, either their life or their genetic mother and father, or the relationship with their birth mother. So now you just have to pick your loss, right? What kind of loss do you want your children to experience? Or what is the least worst kind of loss that the kids are going to experience? Maybe you're thinking, well, they'll lose a relationship with their birth mother. They're going to maybe be saddled with some of the attachment issues and trust issues or abandonment struggles that children who lose their birth mother are going to face, but at least they're not going to deal with the genetic identity issues that children that are raised apart from their families will experience. Or maybe you will say, all right, since we're 53 and it would be hard for us to have a newborn again, because even though the baby was created 15 years ago, we would have been a little easier to raise them then. You say, okay, well, we're going to allow somebody to adopt our children. They'll retain the relationship with their birth mother. We'll have an open relationship so they can know the identity of their biological parents and their biological siblings. Maybe have some of the the identity struggles that go along with not being raised. Maybe they're going to look totally different maybe they're going to live in completely different socioeconomic circumstances. I mean, and then they'll come to us and they'll say, why did you keep those 2 siblings and reject me when I look like a carbon copy of you? And the 2 kids that you chose to raise don't look like you as much as I do. I mean, now you've got to be prepared for those kinds of questions too. So you have to choose the loss that you think is going to be the least minimal for the kids and then be prepared to answer their questions.